Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name's Andy, and along with Professor Todd, we're going to take you through another episode of the Take Care Men and Mental Health podcast. On this episode 3, we're going to be taking a sort of high-level look at depression, not necessarily the symptoms, but what causes depression, the ways you can treat it. Todd's going to take the lead on this because he has a lot more knowledge and expertise on it than I do. But so welcome back. Thank you for joining me. And Todd, I mean, who knew we'd make 3 episodes, hey?
I know. This is kind of a milestone, and enjoyed having Garrett on last episode. That was fun. I got to ask you how you're doing because last on Sunday, I was actually did the sort of an interview or conversation over on Drew Williams's channel, the Whisker Assassin on YouTube, and I wore. Where did it go? I just had it here. I wore my red cap, my red Falcons cap, in support of England, trying to pull them through. Unfortunately, I got off of that interview right when the penalty kicks were starting. So unfortunately, I didn't see anything before that, but I did see the whole penalty kick thing. You said it was 1966, right? The last time that they won. So my Falcons, my beloved Falcons, were founded in 1966. I have it here on a cup to prove that we've yet to win a Super Bowl. So I feel your pain. I understand. And we did blow a Super Bowl lead. We were 28-3 going into the fourth quarter. So I understand the pain. So I just want you to know I tried to support England as much as I could possibly, but I imagine the country's in a collective state of depression, small D depression this week.
I think most people have got over it already, to be honest. I think it was always going to be a big ask. Italy were arguably probably the best team in the competition, and we did well to get there. I think we deserved to get there, but I think some poor decisions by Gareth Southgate with the penalty takers and maybe throughout the whole tournament, we just set up too defensively, really. So, yeah, it's disappointing, but hey, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah, it's that's a tough way for a game to be in penalty kicks.
It is.
That's a tough one.
Nobody likes penalties in football.
Yeah.
It's 50-50. It's a toss of a coin. So,
yeah.
But yeah, never mind. How are you, Todd? What have you been up to?
I'm doing pretty well. Teaching 3 different courses, and my wife's about to start back to work. She's a school teacher, and so this is a busy time of year in our house from late July to say mid-August. It's pretty crazy because school's starting back up for both of us, and the little bit of a lull we've enjoyed during the summer of not having to be as hectic, starts to disappear. So back to sort of the real world, and being the sort of the first solid school year after COVID, or what we would hope to be post COVID, is going to be interesting. I will say this: my brother tested positive this week, and he got his second vaccination injection 2 months ago. And so somebody reminded me, hey, we have to keep in mind this is kind of like the flu shot in that it will lessen your symptoms. Even if you do get it, your symptoms will be less severe. And that's the case for him. He's not had, very severe symptoms at all. But it'd just be interesting to see if we're going to have to get booster shots or what have you, in the upcoming months. So I think there's still probably for everybody a little bit of anxiety, wondering, okay, will this last? Will this last in terms of being able to have some of the restrictions ended? So hopefully that's going to be the case. So you're about to start your new job, right?
Yeah, I mean, Monday I start my new job. Yeah, so it's exciting times, and I mean, to be honest, so far I've been impressed. I haven't even started the job, and all my PPE was delivered to my door. My laptop was delivered to my door on Friday. My ID badge was delivered this morning. So yeah, so far so good. But
all set to go. Yeah,
I think Monday, probably the whole of next week will be a little bit of a chilled out week. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've had 2 weeks off, and I'm looking forward to getting back in and to starting a new challenge more than anything. It's always exciting when you start a new job. And
yeah, most definitely.
But yeah, it's if anybody was wondering why I've got my James Brown and my Elvis town, as Todd mentioned, it is absolute sweltering here, and I know it's relative to the heat that you guys have some in some places in the US, but we don't have any aircon, so I'm melting. So by the end of this episode, I'll probably be melted in a heap of flesh and bones in my
Yeah,
chair. But
just a little
so
puddle.
if I am mopping my brow, it's because I'm absolutely red hot. But yeah, it's been a warm one here today, so.
Yeah, well, it can't stay summer forever, so hopefully it starts
No,
cooling down soon. Football season.
I am the summer Grinch. I hate the summer. I'd much
Yeah,
rather it was winter all year
yeah,
round.
yeah. I could skip over these hot months, no doubt. So yeah, as you said in this episode, we're going to kind of do a deep dive a little bit on like what are some of the causes for depression, also some of the best ways to treat it. We've kind of talked a little bit about symptoms in the past, touched briefly on some things related to treatment, but we're going to kind of do a deep dive on that. But I do want people to stick around to the end because we do have a giveaway that I announced on my YouTube channel related to episode 2. So I'll re-mention that at the end of this episode so that everybody can get a chance to enter that. And the nice thing, it's not CONUS only because there's no aftershave involved, so we can ship it anywhere in the world. By the way, I was looking. I was things I was adding into your package to send to you, and I went on some website to look at the restricted list for the UK, like things you can't ship to the UK, right? And in there was on the list was a phrase that came up last week, which was knuckle dusters, like the actual phrase, which was related in relation to the readings I had on last week.
So you've been to Fight Club.
The actual phrase was there. So I can't, because I actually have this collection of pocket knives. I'm like, I'm sending Andy a pocket knife, and I'm started like, I can't send that one. Can't send that one anyway. But yeah. So excited for you to get your package and try out that new soap that you ordered from Pasteurs.
Yeah.
So yeah, stick around and hear about that because it is a soap and a balm, and so we can ship that anywhere. So that's going to be great. So we'll talk about that towards the end. And also, I've put together a pretty challenging quiz for Andy. I'm excited to see how he does on that, and hope that our listeners and viewers can play along as well and see how well they do. So that's always fun. But okay, so let's just get right into it. So there were kind of 3 videos that I reviewed, and that one of which I know that you watched as well for this week, to kind of give a little bit of structure about what we're going to talk about, and we'll put links into those videos in the show notes, and I'll kind of mention where some of it comes from as we go through there, so that people can refer to it. But when we think of depression or just mental health in general, I think it's helpful to sort of look at how we've traditionally looked at it within like the mental health professions. So psychiatry, psychology, counseling, social work, et cetera. And traditionally, the model has been this of something is sometimes called the STAR model, as an acronym, STAR, with the S being stimulus, meaning things happen in your life, the T being the thoughts. So things happen, you have thoughts about what's happening. The A is affect, which is another word for emotions. So things happen, you think about it, that cause you to have certain emotions, and then the R is response, and so you respond to it. So this basic idea of that are the events that happen in our lives affect our thoughts, which affects our feelings, which affects our behavior. But of course, it's not as nice and neat and linear as that, right? Like, behavior affects emotions, and emotion affects thought, and it's not that clean, right? It's really a lot more messy than that. It's sort of a house of cards. So, as I think most people are aware of, or many people may not be aware of, and it's part of why we wanted to cover this topic, is that that at least part of how we've traditionally understood, particularly within the last 3 decades, the 90s, at least in the US, was known as the decade of the brain within mental health, because we started to understand more and more how the actual structures and chemicals in the brain affect it. So we've largely operated in the last 3 decades under a neurotransmitter model of mental illness, meaning that basically our brain cells have gaps between them, and those gaps are bridged by certain chemicals called neurotransmitters. And primarily when we're talking about depression, we're talking about serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. Those are the 3 primary
I'm
chemicals.
glad that you're taking the lead on this one, Todd, because that third word I've been practicing that all
Yeah.
day, and
Yeah, that one's hard. Yeah, serotonin, dopamine, no problem. That rolls off. But norepinephrine, no, you have to hear that one about 1,000 times before you can nail it. Yeah. And I'm sure I'm still not doing it well. But yeah, that's those are the chemicals that are sort of, and dopamine is sort of thought of as the pleasure chemical. It's involved in a variety of things, but those three in particular, and most particularly serotonin, has been targeted by most of the traditional antidepressant medications. So what happens between your brain cells is that certain chemicals are released to have those messages go across those brain cells, but sometimes your brain can soak up too much of that chemical that you need. So quite often what happens is there needs to be some extra serotonin laying around in order to make those connections happen. And sometimes our brains take up, like, suck it back up, almost vacuum it back up too quickly. And so a lot of the antidepressants are what are called SSRIs, which is just an acronym for a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So it's basically saying those little vacuums in our brains that suck up the serotonin, the medications turn those off and allow that extra serotonin to hang around so that the messages between our brain cells can get relayed a lot better. And this certainly has been shown to be true through brain scans, both in how the structure of our brains can actually look different when we're depressed and actually have a decrease in certain size of the structures of the brain. But also they do brain activity scans. The brain actually sort of lights up, so to speak, from this neurochemical electrical activity based on what part of the brain is being activated, right? And so what we know is that you see much less brain activity in people who are depressed, and we also see a shrinking of certain parts of the brain, certain structures of the brain, even parts like the amount of gray matter. So there's clearly these chemical, genetic. Well, I'll get to genetics in a little bit, but this chemical neurological sort of markers that indicate, that depression is in fact happening, and that tendency to have our brain not produce those chemicals as much as they should, or to soak up the excess more than they should, tends to be a genetic link there. It's not perfectly predictable, but there is a strong genetic connection around that whole issue. But what we're generally trying to target there is emotion. That's what we're trying to do with the neurotransmitters. Now, depression and anxiety have mostly been referred to as mood disorders as compared to thought disorders. Thought disorders are things more like schizophrenia, which are much more severe disorders because they really affect your ability to think clearly at all. But just to call depression and anxiety a mood disorder is a little bit of a disservice, because it doesn't just affect your emotions; it affects your thoughts and your life in every possible way. But largely, what we've targeted within depression is the symptom, right, of basically feeling depressed, of feeling blue, of feeling like you can't do anything you want to do, like just it being hard to get out of bed in the morning. We've already talked about a lot about the symptoms, but basically, this model of a chemical imbalance in the brain with medication trying to target the chemical imbalance. But what's happened within the last decade, and a lot of this is explained in a video by Dr. Tracy Marks that we'll link in the show notes, where she goes into talking about that we're learning much more about neuroplasticity. Which kind of sounds like you have a plastic brain, which which in essence we do, meaning that some of these neuropathways in our brain, and when I say neuropathways, I mean that our brain starts to get into certain patterns about how it relays information, and those are formed as soon as we're born. We start having these neuropathways formed, and sometimes we can get worn out paths, like certain connections or tracks that have become automatic, that we can actually change, that we can actually rewire our brain, so to speak. So
Yeah.
our brain is fluid, and that's an encouraging concept, right? Like it's a little challenging to realize, okay, yes, there's some well-worn paths there that may be part of the problem. We have to sort of rewire our brain. But with any of this stuff we're talking about what causes depression, there's always the classic chicken and egg question, right? Like, which came first? And so you can have things that are happening to you that cause you to feel different, which in turn can affect your brain chemicals, which in turn can, you know what I mean? So it's like a loop or a cycle. And
Yeah,
so
she
much of,
likens
yeah,
it to
yeah, go ahead.
like
Yeah.
she likens it to like the CPU of a computer, doesn't she? And
Right.
the fact that
That's right.
it learns, it's always learning things, but then actually it's forgetting stuff, and then yeah, it's I suppose an ever evolving process of uh, well, it is. It's like a computer, really. It's a very technical organ. So
Yeah, and you actually put in the show notes something that stood out to me as well. As she was highlighting the research of a scientist that had focused on this, and he used this. He basically proposed this theory of like how our brain cells, which are also called neurons, work together. And you put this in there. What was said, which was neurons that fire together wire together, meaning if they're in sync, then the connections get made better. But neurons that fail out of sync fail to link, meaning that they're not synced up, and so they don't link together and get the message across. So in essence, your brain's just not in certain parts of your brain are not functioning as well as they might should, and sometimes parts of your brain are over functioning. In other words, like in anxiety, our fight or flight response has been overworn, say through trauma or what have you, and so we're always on edge, which is a good, like our brain, that part of our brain, we want it to function, but we don't need it functioning all the time, right?
yeah,
So being able to turn it off and just turn it on when we need it is important. And so that's kind of what
yeah,
this whole idea of
it's
neuroplasticity is about.
it's little things like that as well that I think, and I'll digress slightly, but that employers need to sort of understand that. I mean, there's probably always going to be a stereotype of people with mental health issues, but if you understand something better, you can deal with it better. And I think there's a lot of, what's the word, ignorance around mental health. It's
Mhm.
easy to just think, oh well, he's not actually got anything wrong with him. He's just a
Right.
bit tired. And but if you actually delve, and I'm not talking about doing a thesis on neuroplasty or anything like that. But if you do just a high level overview of
Hmm.
why depression rears its head, then people would
Hmm.
actually understand. Well, actually, it may be a hereditary thing,
Hmm.
or it may only be a temporary thing. Because something else that the lady touches on in the video is the fact that we need to get to a point where we're actually repairing the damage rather than just plugging the hole. And
Right.
yeah, I do feel that because a lot of people, a lot of companies, especially big corporate companies,
Hmm.
will bang on about doing mental health first aid courses, which, yeah, they cover the signs and symptoms of it, but they don't actually educate people into why something happens. And like I said, it doesn't need to be a complicated thing. It needs to be like an idiot's guide, really,
Right.
about
Yeah.
why somebody is stressed, or why depression is actually a thing. So
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that not only have workplace approaches, but also just treatment in general. Even the professions that like that I'm a part of, mental health professions that are supposed to be responsible for people's mental health, have done it a disservice in a couple of ways. One is early on, we didn't understand the brain well enough, right? And so we didn't explain the chemicals in the brain and the structures in the brain and those kinds of things. And I think a lot of people still don't understand that, right? And in essence, a lot of their response, and here I'm talking more about employers or just people in the public, to tell someone, well, do some things to not be depressed is like telling someone with glasses to you just won't you try harder to see, right? Or someone with a broken arm, you just need to take that cast off and like use it more, you'll be fine, right? I mean that's in essence what some people want to do. So there is clearly these underlying structural and chemical things that are going on for people who are depressed. However, all that said, is I think that we do, as you indicated, as is mentioned in the video, about sort of targeting the actual symptoms and not so much the underlying causes, is to understand that, again, that chicken and egg thing is that maybe the chemical stuff is a result of some other things that are going on. In other words, depression has many causes, right? Like it has many causes, but the causes can change your brain and change the chemicals in your brain, and it's not something that gets changed overnight. Um, And unfortunately, this is a bit of a sort of a confession of the way that the mental, and because I've been the director of a community mental health center and I sort of know what goes on behind the scenes, is that an unfortunate influence upon the whole treatment approaches to depression is this, what some of us would call a CYA approach, or a cover your ass approach, meaning that the biggest fear of mental health professionals, obviously, is one of their clients becoming suicidal, right? And so, unfortunately, a lot of times the treatments err on the side of let's give people the usual and customary treatment, right? And so, therefore, we have these categories we put people in, like you're depressed or you're anxious, or, we even have codes for it, all that kind of stuff. So then we can, prescribe, so to speak, and sometimes it may not be medication, but still we're prescribing some types of treatment, even if we're just a therapist with no medicine. And we're saying here's the thing we usually give people who have this thing, right? Instead of it being highly individualized and focused on the individual person. So quite often, it's just like, well, when people are depressed, we give them antidepressants because that's what we do, because we want to be seen as being doing the thing that you always do for people who are depressed. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
But for some people, a medication ends up not working for them. Like, they can take it for several years and it not work, and they can try different medications and it not work. So I think it's important to understand that there are other treatments other than just medication, but it's something, you have to talk with your doctor about in close connection and understand. But I think it's also important to note that you have to take control of your treatment. Like, if you're expecting your doctor to fix you, that's not realistic. You have to be the one sort of in charge of what's happening in your life. Now, here's the thing. That's where depression and some other disorders can be so cruel, is it sort of robs you of your ability to sort of call the shots, if you will, right? Like, it makes it hard to get out of bed in the morning, that kind of thing. But that said, the great thing that medication does, when it works for people, and again, you have to, just like trying to find a good therapist, you have to find the right medication sometimes, is that it helps to sort of bridge that gap of where you don't feel like doing anything, where you at least start to feel like doing some things. And then at that point, you can start doing the things that help you get better in addition to just the medication. And unfortunately, I think that part of what we're trying to do as advocates around talking about mental health and getting treatment for mental health is part of what we've had to do, is we've had to really latch on to this chemical brain structure model to fight stigma. In other words, we've had to say to people, no, look, it changes our brain chemicals. It changes our brain structures, which it totally does. But to just pitch that as the only understanding really does a disservice, although it is the best way to sort of combat stigma, right? And I think it's kind of like what you're saying. Like, we almost need to do the idiot's guide piece, right? To help people understand the actual biochemical thing that's going on. But then as we get society more at a level of understanding that, then we need to move them on into a much more complex understanding of depression, because part of what's true for us as humans, we love simple explanations, right? We just want to know, okay, if I fix this thing, this thing works. And, nothing is rarely, works that well. And so what was really interesting to me is a second video we'll link. And it's a TED talk from a journalist from England, whose name is Johan Hari. And so he had struggled with depression his whole life, had taken medication, and just didn't find any of it to work for him long term. And so he set out on this basically extensive research to try to talk to the leading experts in the world, like what causes depression. And people's views of depression are very much culturally bound, meaning they see depression different in different cultures. But he came back with this whole idea of that there's sort of these 9 major disconnections that take place, and I'll add a few of my own to it as well. But I think it's helpful to go through these. And the very first one that he mentions in his book is this is such a huge contributor to people's depression, is feeling disconnected from their work, and more specifically, feeling like they don't have any power to shape the work that they do, meaning they don't have a voice in the workplace. They're just supposed to show up and be a cog in the wheel, and there's no opportunity for them to give any kind of feedback of how to do things better. It's just like showing up and doing work that they really don't feel like they have any control over. That's and unfortunately, like, that is the statistic he gives in the book is something like that's 87% of workers feel that way. Like that in today's,
Empowerment.
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then in today's society, we just feel disempowered within the workplace. Um, and, I think that's something you and I have talked about a little bit, and certainly was an issue for you in the job that you just left.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're paid to do a job, and I'm stealing this phrase, I've been watching a program on Netflix about logging in the US, and
Yeah.
it might be Canada actually, but the guy that was responsible for choking the logs and dragging them up the claim, he, he didn't get the quota that they were supposed to get, and the boss came down and he's like, well, why are you doing it this way? You should be doing it this way. And he got frustrated and he's like, well, you're paying me to do a job, let me do the job, otherwise you do the job. And that's how it is in a lot of industries. Like, you're paid to be, I don't know, a scientist, let them do their put their spin on it, or you're paid to be, I don't know. Everybody has a different way of doing things, but you're paid to do the job that you're employed to do. So as long as you're getting that end product and the thing that you should be doing right, then leave somebody alone to do it. And yeah, it's frustrating because when you can see an easier or a quicker way of doing something, and you suggest it and it goes like in one ear and out the other, it's like, well, why do I bother? I'm trying to make this easier for everybody, not just me. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. And, I'd like to see us do a whole episode on this whole topic of like work and satisfaction with work. But I think you're right. I think, a part of what you described there is what some people would call micromanagement. In other words, that your superior or supervisor or boss or whatever doesn't trust you to do the job the way you want to. Like sometimes they almost assume that you don't take pride in your own work. Like and so I often see leaders and supervisors and superiors or whatever as their primary role is to equip you to do your job. Like in other words, their job is to kind of take care of you, is the way I see it. And there's a lot of models around that, servant leadership, that kind of thing. But instead, many times they're trying to do your work for you, and like are just kind of on your ass 24/7, like like just trying to. And unfortunately, now I use 24/7, but unfortunately, like now with us being able to be connected, immediately, sometimes that happens to people that they're even when they're not on the job, like their boss is harassing them about something, right? And so yeah, I think this something we definitely need to revisit, because I think a lot of people struggle with that. But so in other words, you can be in a situation in a workplace that's so bad that it can be the primary reason you're depressed. I mean, people don't need to miss that. Can that experience change your brain chemistry? Hell yeah. It's not. But so it's these are not simple sort of way. You can't look
I
at it
think
in a simple way.
sometimes it's depression's a culmination of things, isn't it? A lot of people just say, "Oh, well, I know." Again, it's quite an ignorant way of looking at it. Oh, he's depressed; he just wants to kill himself, or he doesn't want to do anything. But it's not that simple, because I know certainly from my experience, the stress of my day-to-day job at that time just kept building and building, and eventually I got to the point where I was like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do this
Hmm.
job. I'm not interested
Hmm.
in, and then that stress is built up to the point where I'm now depressed, and I'm stressed with depression as well. So it's
Yeah, I'm going to blank here on the author that said this, but that most men live lives of quiet desperation, and I think the reason for that for so much of us, and as I said, it's like basically 85% of us, is that we don't really have much to look forward to, because we feel like we're trapped in these jobs where it's like, oh, I get to go do this thing, come home, and then go do it again tomorrow again, right? And if I'm lucky, I can work in some holidays, some vacations, some time with my family, that kind of thing. And I even talk about this in one of my shave videos where I talk about how we might could use, like sometimes we use our hobbies to escape this fact that we're like we hate our jobs, like we're trying to buy ourselves some distraction, so to speak, right? So I think that it's real, and again, that's why we need a whole episode with this, is that it's not easy to get out of those situations often, uh, And in particular, and again, the whole episode from this, but particular when you get to be a man of a certain age, it's less easy for you to move around within the workplace because you've either already pigeonholed yourself around a certain career, or they're not looking for people that are your age or whatever, right? And so it gets harder and harder to do that as you get older. So we definitely want to come back around to that and revisit the whole work thing. But I do want to just say to anybody that's watching or listening, keep in mind your work situation can be a major source of stress and can even feed into depression. Related to that in many ways is feeling disconnected from other people, which is another thing that he identified, and particularly being disconnected from mutually beneficial relationships. I think, everybody's been in a relationship where they feel like that they're not really benefiting, but the other person's benefiting, right? Whether it's a personal relationship or even a relationship with people at work. But he just identified that, feeling disconnected from other people, and you touched on this last week in episode 2, and just reminding all of us that the pandemic has basically created a situation where people are lonely and isolated. Then he gets it talks about disconnection from meaningful values, and this idea that deep down we all have these intrinsic values of things that are what guide our life, sort of the better angels of our nature, if you will. So, serving other people, taking care of our families, um, doing something that's creative, whatever, as opposed to extrinsic value, which is like just earning money, just trying to earn money to buy more stuff or to buy a bigger house or to whatever, right? Sort of chasing consumerism. And we're surrounded by a world that tells us, our wives, our kids to buy, like, buy this stuff to have this life that you need to have. Right. And we all fall, trapped to it. And as another shaver said to me one time, he and I were talking, he was talking about a particular artist, and he said their marketing campaign is right out aggressive. Like, it's just like, it's, wherever you go, spit on my mic here, wherever you go, that they're hitting you with an ad. Right. And so I think that sometimes we can get disconnected from the things that are our goals that we're really trying to do, or how we want to live our life, because we're just trying to function and provide for our families. And so disconnecting from our values is an issue. Now, another topic that will definitely be a future episode is this whole idea of trauma we've experienced, whether that's trauma in childhood or trauma as an adult. That trauma can make us disconnect from that. So essentially, very quickly, what we have to do with trauma is we have to learn how to reconnect to it and process it appropriately. So for many of us, we have disconnected from that trauma in an unhealthy way. We've not dealt with it yet. We've not filed it away and sort of integrated it into how we live our day-to-day lives. And so that trauma has caused a disconnection for us, and it's work that we have to do around that. To me, related to job was also this idea of him saying that he found that disconnection from status and respect. In other words, if we feel inferior in any way, if we're either, in a situation where people are trying to make us feel inferior, or there's something going on where we do feel inferior, and that in itself can become a self-fulfilling prophecy when you're dealing with some sort of mental illness like depression, is because you feel broken. You feel like, oh gosh, I'm less than other people because I can't do X, Y, and Z, which is a really toxic way to look at it, because you're just dealing with an illness like any other, illness. But when we get in those situations where we feel like we are inferior in some way, that can be a cause of depression. Um, this one's a big one that I really means a lot to me, is disconnection from nature. So, like, the research shows, like, if we can get fresh air, if we can get in green spaces, meaning places with literal grass and trees, and you know uh, I love the mountains and the like, and lakes and rivers. I'm not a big beach guy, but I love the mountains and lakes and stuff like that. And then sunlight, like the research around sunlight. If you're talking about workplaces, the biggest thing we could do for workplaces is make sure that every workspace had like a sunlight, or a sun. What am I trying to say? Like a like the things they put in, like a roof light.
Like a
I'm trying to
skylight,
say
yeah. So,
skylight. There
yeah.
you go, skylight. Yeah, and and definitely when possible, have as many windows as possible in the workplace, because we need natural sunlight. Like, it's just shown to be true, and we'll see some of that when we look at the treatment things here. But just to move on here, so. I think this is huge also around work, and also as we get older and we think about retirement and all those kinds of things down the road, is sometimes we can feel disconnected from having hope about a secure and hopeful future. That we may feel like we don't have a whole lot of control over our life. Somebody else is controlling our life. Sometimes that can be, we feel like our employer is controlling our life. So knowing that we have safety and finances to take care of things in the future is huge. And then he mentions the usual things we've already talked about, which is genetics and neurochemical changes, which I won't touch on because we've already talked about it. But I would add to that list of things he mentions as disconnections that are well researched, by the way, but also situational things, which we've talked about before. Like if you've lost a loved one, if you're having conflict with, your spouse, if you have other stressors that are going on, those can add to your depression. Vitamin deficiency. You need to consult your doctor, but it's usually recommended that you take some sort of multivitamin supplement, because sometimes depression can be, made worse by having inadequate vitamin, like a deficiency. Having enough sleep, staying well hydrated are important things. Also, some people's personalities or their disposition tends to just lean towards being depressed. It doesn't mean that can't be overcome, but sometimes that's what's sort of genetically influenced there, is this personality and disposition thing. And then this definitely is an episode we want to do, cognitive distortions. And this is talked about more in anxiety than it is depression, but it certainly is a part of depression as well. So cognitive distortions is sometimes called stinking thinking, is this idea that we can think of things in a way that are not accurate. So, we catastrophize things, like, um, so my boss gave me a glare at work, just, he didn't even say anything to me. He just stared at me in a certain way. And so now I know I'm going to be fired, and we're going to have to let our house, we're going to have to sell our house and move into an apartment because I'm not, that kind of thing. So catastrophizing is going from something simple where you have very little information and you just jump to the worst possible. So there's like 10 of those cognitive distortions. So we need to visit those in a future episode because it's something I think is helpful for people to think about. And then also just attempting to alter mood through other substances. Now, we all do this sometimes in socially acceptable ways like caffeine, or alcohol, or sometimes illegal drugs, whatever the case may be. But those can also contribute to depression. Like one of the most sinister ones is crystal meth, because crystal meth, what it does is not only does it make it, like when you come down off of it, not only does it, obviously you're coming down and you're not feeling euphoric anymore, but it makes it more difficult for you to feel happy in your day-to-day life. It raises the ceiling on what it takes for you to feel happy. So it actually destroys your ability to be happy. So some of these most sinister, medications can affect that. Being mindful of time here, but I do want to touch on some things related to treatment really quickly. And this gets to the third video. Emma McAdams is also a great YouTuber who has a channel called Therapy in a Nutshell. And, she just talks about the basic approaches to getting treatment for depression, and obviously starts with about talking to your doctor, considering getting a therapist. She reiterates what I said, I think maybe in the first two episodes, that finding a therapist is like finding a good barber. You may have to go through some bad haircuts before you find the one that works. Movement, getting exercise. You mentioned last week going for a run. I think it was last week you mentioned that you went for a run for the first time in a while.
I haven't been since, unfortunately. But it is frustrating because in my head I do want to get out there and do it, but just the way I'm feeling and the situation, I suppose it's stopping me from doing it, and it shouldn't be. It's frustrating because I do want to go and do it, but it's always that little. I can't. It's like a devil and an angel on your shoulder. The angel saying,
Yes.
"Go out and do it. You'll feel better," and the devil's going, "No, you don't need to go out.
Really do that."
Yeah." And it's annoying, and that's like exacerbated by depression and stress. It's
Yeah. The Greeks had a word for that, which fascinates me. It's akrasia. It's the ability of it's humans. It's when we live in a way that we know is different than how we want to live. In other words, like we know we need to exercise, but we don't, right? I don't know if you ever watched the cartoon George Jetson, like if you ever seen that, the Jetsons.
yeah.
So if you remember, George has this thing that basically pulls him out of bed and throws him on a treadmill. I'm waiting for that alarm clock. Like I have the treadmill and an alarm clock, but it doesn't pull me out of bed and strap me to the treadmill. That's what I'm looking for, is something, because I'm 5 feet away from a treadmill right
I
here,
tell you that I'm gonna find that now. There is a YouTuber out there that makes contraptions like that. They
That's what I
made
need.
one. Yeah, they made one the other day, or the other before Christmas time, I think it was. That it puts make it, well, it basically gets you ready in the morning, and let me find it.
Yeah, we need one for that, for treadmills. Yeah, if while you're looking for that, and this is kind of related to like getting up in the morning. There's some really cool alarm clock apps that, well, depends on, they can also be seen as the devil depending on what you think of them when you're waking up. But there's one that requires you to like walk 50 steps before it will turn off, and so you have to actually walk with your phone. There's another where you'll take a picture. Let's say you take a picture of your something in your kitchen, your refrigerator or whatever. And in order for your alarm to go off, your camera has to go and match that picture. In other words, you have to get up out of the bed and go find that thing. There's others that require you to play a game of tic-tac-toe, that kind of thing. So there's things out there that do try to wake you up in a different kind of way, but I still haven't found anything to make me get on my treadmill. Maybe if I hooked my television to my treadmill where the TV only worked, if I
Maybe.
were on the treadmill, that might work. Who knows? But there's a lot of good research behind yoga. I know some of you may not feel manly, may not see that as a manly thing to do yoga. But if you're familiar with the former wrestler Diamond Dallas Page, he has a whole form of yoga that he touts as being not your mama's yoga, and it's DDP yoga, and so it's kind of masculine yoga, so to speak. But there's a lot of great research about the effects of
There we
yoga.
go. I found it. Joseph's Machines. I don't know if you can pick that.
Joseph's machines.
Joseph's Machines, and
We will.
he's made one
Okay.
that machine applies makeup in under 5 seconds.
Yeah, there you go. I need that for, I need something to throw me on the treadmill and not allow me to get off, until I've completed 30 minutes of exercise. But yeah, we'll put a link to that channel in the show notes. This sounds fascinating. All right, let's see. Get adequate sleep, good sleep hygiene, which unfortunately, like, for me, like staying away from blue light at night, like staying away from screens is important. And I'm not very good at that. But you want to try to remove any excess light from like your bedroom, try to make it as cool as possible, et cetera, et cetera. And then making tiny steps towards your dreams or purpose. In other words, we tend to be a little perfectionistic about that. Like we can work a little bit on a project we're trying to do or something, that we're trying to do. And part of what he talks about in the previous video we just talked about with the different disconnections, and then also working on things that you care about, if I can, sort of praise the two of us for a second, which will sound completely narcissistic, but that's kind of what we're doing, is we're connecting with other people, but we're also trying to talk about something we really care about. Right. And so doing this kind of thing, even though you and I are both busy trying to find the time to do it, it's hard, all that kind of thing. It serves a purpose for us just as well as it does what we're trying to accomplish. And so connecting with people, and she mentions that, connecting with other humans, talking about making sure that you're getting adequate sunlight. I actually have a light I set in front of in the mornings that helps me with my sleep disorder that I deal with, but also it helps me, particularly in the winter months when I'm not getting a whole lot of sunlight, to feel less depressed. And then just the different treatment options. We're not going to go into these in real detail because we want to do that in a future episode, but just the different types of therapy that are out there. CBT, which is really focuses on changing your thinking in order to change the way you feel. But there's also those stress management skills. Readings, it's real easy to dismiss this as hokey, but reading self-help books can be really helpful. Like there's some great ones out there. Garrett mentioned last week the book on adult children of alcoholics. And if you go to our podcast page at takecareman.com, I've got a link to that book that he mentioned last week. But there's tons out there that are good. Obviously, there's some that are kind of hokey and not that great, but there's some great ones out there. And if maybe in the future we can do an episode on some good books that are out there for people. And then for people that really are not responding to treatment over long term, there are some more cutting edge therapies that are out there. There's transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is like these mild electric charges
Wow.
that are used. Yeah. And then there's the old school ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, except now the literal like voltage and wattage is much, much less. Like it's tiny, 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 tiny. It's not like these horror stories. One of the problems there, just inside baseball here for a second, one of the horror stories about that was that the only people doing research behind ECT were the companies making the machines back in the day. And so there was no, you see what I mean? Now, something is very fascinating is what's happening in the realm of psychedelic drugs or medications, if you will, particularly around psilocybin and ketamine. So psilocybin, which is a product of mushrooms, and ketamine, both are basically hallucinogenic type drugs. There have now been approved by the FDA to treat, and here in the U.S., the Federal Drug Administration. In Nashville, which is the closest sort of large city to me, there's tons of ketamine clinics. However, insurance doesn't pay for it yet, and doctors are using. So right now, the recommendations are, do this with a doctor, and there's doctors that can do it. But right now, insurance has not started to cover it because it seemed
So,
extremely experimental.
what Professor Todd's saying is go out and find some magic mushrooms.
And I don't want to get too much into this, but I know someone very, very well that has experimented with psilocybin, who also forages for mushrooms out in the woods, knows how to find them, has even grown some of his own. And maybe in the future, when we can feel there be no legal repercussions, we might have that person on the podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, I know this person really, really well. Really well.
I will just say, don't take that as gospel. Don't go out and find magic mushrooms and say we told you to do it.
Because you could die if you eat the wrong mushroom. You could die. So don't go out and find. Yeah, but nonetheless, there's some great research that's happening around that. So hopefully, in the near future, you're going to see insurance approve that, and that can be done under medical supervision. Now, I realize that was a whirlwind of sort of looking at the different causes for depression and sort of different ways to approach treating it. And obviously, some of this we want to break down going in future episodes. But I think we looked at this and sort of felt like this is important to sort of establish, I think, a foundation for understanding all the different things that can feed in, particularly to depression, which is the most common mental disorder. But many of these things can feed into anxiety, and obviously anxiety and depression can exist together. So we'll do deeper dives in the future on these in future episodes, but I felt it was important to hit those. And again, the 3 videos that we referenced here will link in the show notes.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to move on to something I way over prepared for, which is the quiz for today. But I'm excited and I actually ran it past my daughter, and I was like, "Is this too easy, too difficult? You tell me what's going on." And she, so anyway, this is approved by my daughter. All right.
I'm not used to being in the question.
I know
master.
this is nice. It doesn't feel comfortable, does it?
I always sit there and say, well, these questions are easy, but they're easy because I'm the one with the answers in front of me.
Right, yeah. And there's something sort of sinister about making out these things, which by the way, I have this note here to say to you that in the U.S., the term quiz is usually an unwelcomed mini exam or test given by a teacher or a professor. Like here we would say it's trivia, like you're doing trivia. Like quiz to us means something painful. So the professor is now going to give you a quiz. It's worth a total of 21 points, which is kind of arbitrary. Some questions have multiple parts. All right. There's 4 bonus questions because, I get carried away. And I'm going to give you the option of taking a hint on the questions, but you'll lose half a point for every hint that you take. You see what I'm saying? All right. So I think for these first ones, what you can do, if you got something to write them down on, you could answer them this way, or we could just do them one by one, ever how you want to do it.
Yeah, I've got a piece of paper.
All right. So these for the first 9, we'll write them down and give people opportunity to play along at home and see how they do. All right. Number 1. You ready?
Yep.
So the football star, what normal people call soccer, Pele, played for which national football team? The soccer star Pele played for which national football team. And again, when we go through these first 9, I'll give you the option of a hint if you don't feel
Yeah.
confident about them.
No,
Okay.
I think I've got that.
Okay. Number 2, Earl Grey tea is made with black tea flavored with the oil from which fruit? Earl Grey tea is made with black tea flavored with the oil from which fruit?
Fruit. I'm gonna write down Earl Grey. I'll have a
Okay.
think about that one.
Yeah, we'll come back, and again, there'll be options for hints if you decide to take them. All right, number 3. When they are not rescuing princesses, driving carts, or defeating gorillas, what do the Nintendo characters of Mario and Luigi do for a living? What's their job or occupation?
No, I know that. I grew up with Nintendo.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. I'm glad you got that one. All right, here we go. The recent film, number 4, the recent film or movie, Space Jam 2, features Looney Tune characters such as Bugs Bunny and basketball star LeBron James. The
I thought that
original
was going to be the answer.
Yeah, the original Space Jam movie, released in 1996, featured cartoon characters and which basketball star?
Okay.
All right. Okay, number 5, halfway through, well, sort of halfway, you got most of it. It's worth of possible 4 points.
Oof.
Okay. All right. So here's 5A. This is very me going way overboard. I didn't think I could come up with 10 questions. The next thing you know, I've got 21 points. All right. So 5A. What you call a chip, I would likely call what? Okay. What you call a chip, I would likely call
as in in a
as in
packet.
food.
Yeah, but is in a packet because we call. Well,
No, what
okay,
you would call a chip, like
okay,
what Andy calls a chip, Todd
yeah,
would
yeah,
likely call what?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I've got that. Yeah,
All right. 5B, what you call a crisp, I would likely call a what?
yeah,
Uh, C, what Andy calls a biscuit, Todd would likely call what?
yeah.
By the way, I need to get some biscuit recommendations from you.
Yeah.
5D, um, describe what Americans call a biscuit. There's a thing that we regard as a biscuit. So see if you can describe what that is, and I'll just have you read that one out when we get there if you know it. But there is something in the U.S. we regard as biscuits that's different than what you think a biscuit is, and it's a very specific thing. But
Okay.
we can revisit that one. Okay, all right. You ready for number 6? It just
Yeah.
has one part, thankfully. All right. So in 2020, just last year, the U.S. Space Force became the 6th official branch of the armed forces, believe it or not. It's funny because the symbol almost looks exactly like the Starfleet Academy thing from Star Trek. It's unbelievable. But, Trump made it up. So what are you going to do? All right. So in addition to Space Force, we have the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. All right. And one other branch that I have not mentioned. What is the branch of the U.S. Armed Forces I have not named? So I named the newly created Space Force, and then the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. But there is one other.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Number 7. The Led Zeppelin drummer John Bonham died in 1980. Sadly, the surviving members of the band famously reunited for a concert later dubbed Celebration Day in 2007 in London's O2 Arena. Who played the drums during that concert? Again, for all these, I'll have hint options as we go through these.
That's definitely one I need a hint.
Okay. All right. Number 8's worth 2 points. How's your knowledge of WWE, like wrestling, professional wrestling?
Depends what era.
Okay.
80s, 90s might be all right. But yeah.
Yeah, these two have been around for a while, so I probably shouldn't have told you that. It's almost here are the real names of 2 people who have wrestled in the WWE. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 names, and I want to know what their ring names are. Okay, the first name is Paul Levesque. Paul Levesque. He has a ring name. And then the second name is Mark Calloway. Paul Levesque and Mark Calloway.
Okay.
All right. So ready for number 9?
Yeah.
Who hold now? This could be current or retired. Who holds the National Football League, American football? Who holds the National Football League record for the most touchdown passes in a season? So what quarterback holds the National Football League record for the most touchdown passes in a season?
Not a clue.
Okay. All right. But I've got hints on all these. So,
Okay.
all right.
Okay.
All right. Here we go. Number 10 is worth it. This one's a doozy. This one's a tough one. Okay. How's your knowledge of the Beatles?
Yeah, not brilliant, but
Okay.
we'll see.
Are you familiar with the song A Day in the Life? Have you ever heard that song by
I've
the
heard
Beatles?
it.
Okay. So in that song, in the final verse, there's two locations in England that are mentioned. Okay. One is a town in Lancashire. Did I say that right? Lancashire?
Lancashire, yeah.
Yeah, there's one is a
They're
town
the
in
enemy. We
Lancashire.
don't talk about them.
Okay. So one was a town in Lancashire, and the other is a concert hall in London. Okay. So can you name the town in Lincolnshire that is mentioned and the concert hall that's mentioned? All right.
That town in Lancashire.
And I'll have hints for those if you struggle with those two. But the name of the town in Lancashire that's mentioned in that song, and the concert hall that's mentioned in London. Okay.
Okay.
And we'll have to come back to this one because your answer to the first one's going to affect the other two. So we can either review 1 through 10 now, and then I give you the four bonus questions, or ever how you want to do it. You want to go ahead and revisit the first?
Let's go 1 to 10, and then
Okay.
we'll do
All
the
right.
4
Sounds
bonus.
good. All right. Okay. So number one, the national team that Pele played for.
Brazil.
That's correct. That is correct.
Yes. Got
All
good
right.
start.
All right. Number two. So I need to keep score over here somewhere. I can do it over here. I got over here. All right. So, number two, Earl Grey tea is made with black tea flavored with the oil from which fruit?
I know this, but I'm going to have to take a hint.
You're going to take the hint? All right. So I'm going to give you a double hint. Okay. I'm feeling generous. So the hint is orange with a green skin. So it's a type of orange with green skin. And the second bonus hint I'll give you here is it's used a lot in wet shaving products.
Is it bergamot?
It's bergamot. Very good. Very good.
Is that half a point?
Yeah. So you got 1.5 points. That's good. 1.5. All right. You felt pretty confident about this. What do Mario and Luigi do for a living?
Plumbers.
They are plumbers. That's correct. 2.5 points. All right. The basketball star in the original Space Jam.
Michael Jordan.
3.5 points. All right. We're doing good here. All right. I just got a thing here said lost connection to server. No, it's reconnected. So maybe if it lost anything, it says it's reconnected. So good.
Yeah, no, we're right.
Okay. All right. So number 5 had four parts here. What Andy calls a chip, Todd would probably call
a fry.
A fry. That's correct. So we're at 4.5. What you call a crisp, I would probably call
a chip.
A chip. That's right. All right. So we're at 5.5. What you call a biscuit, I would call
a cookie.
A cookie. All right. 6.5. And then can you describe what Americans would call a biscuit?
Yeah, this one's got me a little bit stumped. No, give me a clue.
All right. So the clue is sausage, butter, jelly, flour.
Sausage, butter, flour.
Which I think y'all call bangers, but maybe bangers are a particular type of sausage.
Sausage, butter, jelly, flour.
Yeah, sausage, butter, jelly, flour.
Jelly, flour. No.
Okay, so a biscuit in the U.S. is kind of like almost like the size of, say, just a dinner roll, but it's made with, flour. And it's real light
biscuit.
And fluffy.
Yeah, you have it with chicken. Yeah. What's that? They have it in Florida. It's chicken. What's it called?
Oh, that's right. You visited your in-laws in Florida a lot. Right?
Yeah, it's I can't remember what it's called, but they have biscuits and they're little.
Yeah, biscuits. Yeah. And fun fact: the Montgomery, Alabama minor league baseball team are the Montgomery Biscuits. All right, so let's see. You got you had 4.5, 5.5, 6. I think we're at 6.5. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. The branch of the national. I'm sorry. I almost gave it away. The Well, I didn't give it away. That's wrong. Don't ignore what I said. Really, that will throw you off. Don't ignore what I said. So the branch of the armed forces I did not mention. I mentioned.
Well,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I've got it as the home guard, but it's a national guard. Like I've got home guard, but you can't. So that's half a point.
Well, yeah, it's actually the Coast Guard. It's the Coast Guard. Yep, that's the sixth one. Yep, yep. So our National Guard is like actually state is run by
Yeah,
the state, and they're just okay. All right, so we're at 6.5 still, I think, right? Yeah, 6.5.
yeah.
All right, now okay. So number 7 was who played the drums during Led Zeppelin's
Ooh,
thing.
I'm
You
not
want to?
got a clue to be not
Okay, you want
the right
to? You
era,
want
but give me a clue.
to? Okay, so your hint is the initials JR. Well, I just say JR. I won't say initials. I just say JR.
JR.
Because it's not the drummer's initials.
I want John Reed.
Okay, so it's his son. It was his son. It was John Bonham's son, Jason Bonham, who
Oh,
normally drives dirt bikes for like a
really?
living, but yeah,
No.
played drums in it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wrong era, wrong era,
played them
or
quite well.
wrong genre for me. That
You don't like Led Zeppelin? Who doesn't like Led Zeppelin,
not
Andy?
really. It's a
We got to
bit.
work. A bit too heavy for you, or?
Yeah, more of the AC/DC.
Okay, I got you. Okay. Well, we'll have to work that. We'll have to work in a little AC/DC trivia next time. Okay, number 8, and I'll try to move a little faster here. So I gave you 2 names: Paul Levesque, Mark Calloway. Any idea who either one of those people are? I have hints if you don't know.
I want to say Paul Levesque is a bit of a trick question because I want to say he was the Undertaker's manager, but I don't think that's right. So I'm going to have to take a clue.
Okay, so one of them was also one of their alternative names because they've all lived different lives. Was Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Okay.
Again, it sounds like it's the wrong era because I'm WWF.
I got you. Yeah, I see what you
Yeah,
mean. Like
British
before.
Bulldog and Ultimate Warrior. And
Yeah.
that.
So I
Yeah.
started to go there with the British Bulldog and those. Yeah, I watched that a lot coming as a kid. All right, and then the other wrestler also had the name of American Badass.
Oh, is one of them Razor Ramon?
All right, so Paul Levesque is better known to fans as Triple H, and Mark Calloway is better known as the Undertaker. So you said Undertaker earlier,
Really?
so I want to give you a point on that. So I think we're at
Really?
7. I think we're at 7.5. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
So the NFL player who
Hasn't there been a couple of versions of the Undertaker though?
There has. So there's been you have the Undertaker, the American. He was also known as the American Badass.
Mm-hmm.
He was known as the Master of Pain at one point. He was known as just Mean Mark Calloway when he wrestled in Memphis. I could go on about that.
I like the guy, and I can't remember his name, but he's like I don't know if that the right. I'm not a big wrestling fan. When I was a kid in the 80s, it was
Right.
like I used to watch the British
Sure.
Bulldog
Yeah.
but there was a guy he's quite modern, and I don't know if it's a finishing move, if that's the right term, but he used to put a puppet on his hand, and he used to.
Oh yeah. That's so you're talking about Mick Foley. That was Sacco.
That's it. Yeah.
And when he teamed up with The Rock, they were called the Rock and Sock
He used to do
Connection.
that,
Yeah, Sacco. Yeah, he was Dude Love, Mick Foley, Mankind. Like he had all kinds of great names. Yeah. All right. Any idea who the NFL player is who holds the lead? Okay. So
I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to give you the hint. See if this helps at all. He played at the University of Tennessee.
Nope, not a clue.
Okay. All right. So Peyton Manning is who holds the NFL
yeah, I
record.
recognize the name, but I wouldn't have known that.
All right. So the Beatles song "Day in a Life," last verse, a town in Lancashire is mentioned, as well as a famous concert hall in London.
Give me the clues. Give me the clues. Okay.
So for the town, the hint is Rovers.
Okay. Rovers.
Rovers is the hint for the town, and then the hint for the concert hall is Princely. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to have a stab in the dark. Is the concert hall Albert Hall, Royal
It's
Albert
Albert
Hall?
Hall. That's right. It's Albert
Okay,
Hall.
and
Yep.
then what was the clue for the other one?
Rovers. The Rovers.
Rovers. The Rovers. Manchester.
It's Blackburn. So it's my understanding that
Blackburn
the
Rovers. Yeah.
football team from there is Blackburn. Okay.
Ah,
I won't torture you with 10B and 10C because they're related to that. But just for the folks at home, so John Lennon in that song sings about the number of what in Blackburn and then Blackburn and the number of hole of the. Well, I've just given it away. He talks about what are the number of holes that are in Blackburn, Lancashire. And how many holes does it take to fill the Albert Hall? The reason he wrote about that is he read a read a story in the paper. Sorry, where it said that within the city of Blackburn, there were like 5,000 potholes or holes in the road that need to be finished. So he worked that into the
yeah,
song.
sounds about right.
All right. So here's your bonus questions. All right.
Okay. How many points are we on? How many points one?
So you're 7.5, I think. I think you're 7.5. Yeah.
7.5. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So, who is this? Well, actually, I think you're at 8.5 because you got the Albert Hall. So, who is? So there's another Beatles question. Who is the singer on the Beatles song "Yellow Submarine"?
Ringo Starr.
It's Ringo Starr. 9.5 points. Very good. All right, little U.S. geography question here. What is the capital city of the U.S. state of New York? Most Americans get this one wrong, by the way. So.
Manhattan.
It is Albany. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, bonus question number 3. Film star Catherine Zeta-Jones is from what country?
Wales.
Very good. I was wanting to use the hint on that one, which was PH could deliver her mail. That was going to be my hint. Only the wet shavers out there would know what we're talking about. All right. Finally, so you got that took you to 10.5. So final question. Han Solo is from which planet? From which planet? Sorry if those at home can hear my dog barking in the background.
Is there a clue for this one?
Yes.
Okay.
The Millennium Falcon is this type of cruiser. The Millennium Falcon is this type of cruiser. So in the movies, they say it's a blank cruiser, which also contains the name of the planet.
Coruscant.
Oh, that's really close. It's Corellia. So Corellia. So it's a Corellian cruiser. Yeah, but 10. What did we say? 10.5.
10.5. That's not bad. That was out of 21.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, and I've already started a list for future quizzes, so I'm excited about this.
We need to have some sort of benchmark, don't we? So
yeah, like a total we're trying to hit.
Yeah, a league. Yeah, we need to have a league. So
we need to in the future. We need to have viewers submitted. Like if it's your off week, they can only email them to me. Then if it's have the viewers create some quizzes.
That's it.
But anyway, that was fun. I had fun putting that one together.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, no, good. Thanks, Todd.
Well, it's I guess time to wrap up, huh?
So it was good. It was good. It was a good episode actually. I learned a lot about I suppose the reasons behind depression, and it's not just a case of like I said earlier, somebody will perceive it as being they just I don't know. It's hard to sort of put a finger on why somebody's depressed. Nobody really goes that
right.
Other than a GP or a medical practitioner. Nobody really goes into the reasons why. And I think if people did, especially employers, went a bit more into the reasons why somebody's feeling the way they are, and instead of, like you say, arse covering, then you'd get a lot more out of people. You'd get people recovering a lot quicker. And and I think depression, people see depression as being a long-term illness, but actually a lot of the time, if you look at the statistics, it's caused by a specific or a build-up of things that isn't necessarily reversible.
Right.
So Yeah.
Yeah. And
I mean,
sometimes it's hard, just like with Garrett was saying about anxiety. If you ask someone who's anxious, they often can't tell you what they're anxious
yeah.
about, and most time people who are depressed can't tell you what's going on
Mm,
with their depression. But if people take nothing away from this episode other than this, I would say take away this idea again that to tell someone, well, you just need to try to
mm.
be more positive is like telling someone who needs
Yeah.
glasses to just
Yeah.
squint harder. Like it
Take
just doesn't. Yeah.
take 5 minutes to sit down with that person, have a brew with them, and just say, look,
Yes.
what is it? Why are you feeling depressed? And I think a lot of people take feeling a little bit down and depression as being they're two different things. They are two different. People say, "Oh, I'm
Right.
depressed," quite like regularly and flippantly, when
Right.
actually being down and being depressed is two different things.
That's right.
But feeling down can lead to depression. So
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. And there's some great, and I think that would be a great topic in a future episode. Is like, what's the difference from just regular sort of
yeah,
depression that you might experience versus clinical depression? Because there is definitely a difference.
yeah, like you say, if you are in a position, not, and I keep referring to work, but that's only because of my own
Yeah.
uh, um, experience. But if you're in a position of management or leadership, and somebody's coming
Mhm.
to you and saying, "Look, I'm depressed," don't think about like the business side of things. Think of that person as a human being, and why, and take it some time to
Yeah.
speak to them, and but not just
Exactly.
from a business point of view, just in life. If somebody comes to
Yeah.
you and says, Andy, I'm
Yep.
depressed, then
Hmm.
if you do have the ability to go and meet that person, meet them, have a coffee, have a tea, and just go, well, what is it? Because even though I'm not a medical professional, and I don't have any formal training. My
Hmm.
my my knowledge is from experience. I'd like to think I can advise somebody on how to make it easier, whether that's going to speak to your doctor or whether that's, I
Hmm.
don't know, downloading a meditation app. You know what I mean?
And here's the thing: people don't realize that this is the secret. Is that when people feel listened to, when they feel heard, it's incredibly powerful. Because here's the thing that would happen to me as a therapist oftentimes. Somebody would come into my office, right? They have an hour-long appointment, and they talk for like 55 minutes straight. I maybe say two sentences. And they get up at the end of the thing and they're like, this has helped me so much. And I've
Yeah,
said like two things. Because talking to someone forces you to organize what you're going through and speak it out into the world, right? And really, all you need to know for the most part, in most cases, unless it's a crisis situation, is you just need to listen to people the way you would want someone to listen to you, right? Like just listen to them the way you'd want to be heard. And it's extremely powerful just to be able to tell your story, be able to have someone hear your story. And even though they may not fully be able to feel what you're feeling, they can at least understand what you're going through. And,
yeah,
as you said, like if you're an employer or a manager or something, hey, you've listened to the podcast this long, take 20 minutes and go watch those 3 videos because they
yeah,
will put you head and shoulders above most people in understanding what depression is like.
yeah. No,
So I want to mention the
100%.
giveaway that we got going on. So I've over on my YouTube channel, and you can find the video at takecareman.com as well, is a video I did recently with a newly released soap, Cade's Cove from Talbot Shaving, which is Cade's Cove is a site here in my home state of Tennessee in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Anyway, when I was there, I did a shave in Great Smoky Mountain National Park at Klingman's Dome with a soap called Smoky Mountain Rain. That's a soap and balm from Lakewood Soap Company. So I'm giving that away. If you watch that video, there's details of what to listen for in episode 2 of our podcast. And I can just mention it here as well. But you're going to listen for what Garrett's favorite soap is. Like he's this particular genre he likes and a maker of that soap, like a particular artisan that makes the soap. And also the answer to Andy's question that he proposed to us was that the answer was the name of a town in the UK. And so you need to provide that and the name of Garrett's soap. And you can just put that in a comment on that video. So we'll link that in the show notes for this episode as well. Also, Andy's done a great job of compiling, if I could talk correctly, of resources in the UK. I've compiled resources for the US, and you can find all those in the show notes, but also at takecareman.com/help for any other resources you'd like to have. Also, you can contact me, Todd at takecareman.com. You can contact either one of us through our YouTube channels. Andy is the Opinionated Brit on YouTube. What's your what's your Instagram?
That's just the
Same
opinionated Brit as well.
Opinionated
Yeah.
Brit as well. We'll link all that in the show notes so you can have any other thing you want to add, Andy, in terms of contact or anything like that.
I don't think so. Obviously, if you want to reach out to me,
Yes.
it's the opinionated Brit at outlook.com. Like I say, you can message me on Instagram or just Facebook or whatever. Send me a message. And there's no, I suppose there's a lot of people will say, well, it's embarrassing, but don't be embarrassed, because that's the hardest thing. We'll say it a lot of the times. Taking that first step and actually
That's
speaking
right.
to somebody about it is the hardest thing sometimes. And then after that, it gets easier. So
Yes, it does. Exactly right. And I've had people reach out already. I've had a lot of great comments on the first two episodes, and I just want to say thank you to you, Andy. Thank you to those that are listening and watching, and for those of you that have participated in any kind of way, we really appreciate it. Um, and hopefully we're going to come up with some ways for you to be even more engaged as we go forward. But we do appreciate you listening, and I encourage you to share our podcast out there on social media. Let people know it's there. We know we're in the beginning stages, and we're kind of trying to find our sea legs, so to speak, in this whole process. But I think what our goals are, what we're trying to do here, and so we invite you to join us in that process and help spread the word and help to make things better for men who may be struggling with mental health issues. So
yeah, no, you're 100%. So yeah, thanks, Todd. I mean, you did most of the talking during this episode. You're the subject matter expert, and it was a learning curve for me. It's every day's a school day, as they say. But yeah, no, we'll be back soon with another episode. If anybody's got any suggestions, again, anybody wants us to talk about anything particular or want us
yes,
send any questions, let us know. We're happy to do a whole episode on questions if we need to. But yeah, from me, it's thank you to everybody that listens and watches. It does mean a lot. And this isn't for our benefit, this is for your benefit. So the more that you guys engage with us, the more we can try and help. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your week, everybody, and we'll catch up with you soon.
go get cool, Andy, and good luck on the first week on the new job.
Yeah, no, I'll try my best. Yeah, thanks, Todd.
All right, talk to
All
you
right, speak
soon.
soon. Cheers. Bye.